What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. Today, I'm talking about voting in America and the different processes because it's quite fascinating if you research it and find out the different ways. It can be confusing. So in today's video, I want to talk about early voting, mail-in ballots, the Electoral College. What does it all mean? I'm breaking it down in today's video. Before we start though, I'd like to share with you all what I was doing on election night 4 years ago. I was a senior in college at the University of Florida. I was sitting in my dorm and I was reporting on the state attorney's race for the 7th Judicial Circuit. But looking back on it now, it was really monumental for me because I was in school not destined to be a journalist, but to use the transferable skills of my journalism degree to work, evidently, in an industry that I now love, which is the legal field. And it's ironic when I look back on it now because in 2020, I reported on the state attorney's race. In 2021, I began working for attorneys. So now let's talk about voting in America and why it matters. The different ways that we vote. There's a few different ways. In-person voting on election day. It's actually election day 2024 when I'm filming this. You go to your designated polling location and cast your vote. I've never actually done this because the next way that we vote is early voting. And early voting is the easiest way for me to vote personally. I mean, I've never taken off work to go vote, or I'm always working during the election day. Now, I will say I am on board with election day becoming a holiday, but I don't know how the logistics of all that would work nonetheless. But early voting is easy. You see videos online of people standing in line to vote. I walked into a local precinct in my county, showed my ID, signed my signature. They printed out my ballot. I voted. I didn't have to stand in line or anything. And it's the easiest way for me to do it. I've only voted twice. Now I'm 25. I've only voted twice in general elections. But voting early is definitely my preferred method. And if you've never voted early, I highly recommend it because it's stress-free, you get the job done, and it's over with. And you move on with your life. The third option is mail-in voting, which really gained popularity in 2020. Personally, I don't know that I would mail my ballot in. I'd rather go in person and see it go through the machine and make sure it gets counted. But that's just me. Some states, that's easier for people. Some states do not have early voting. So it's either election day or mail-in. Early voting should be universal. But you need volunteers, you need poll workers. It's actually a life goal of mine one day, because I have a friend who's done this. She's older than me, and she's actually an election worker this year. And that's a really cool thing. And it's all volunteers. The person I handed my ID to when I went to go vote was a veteran, and he was probably in his 70s, but he was a veteran and he was volunteering as a poll worker. Then there's ranked choice voting. So this is different and interesting because you rank candidates by preference instead of just picking one. I've never heard of that until recently. And I think that's kind of a unique and interesting take on things. I'm not really sure what it is or why people decide to do it that way, but maybe I'm sure there's a reason. So each state has different rules based on where you live. The most important thing is that you participate and you vote. I, for one, am a huge champion of early voting because it's easy, it's quick, it took less than 5 minutes. It's easier. But I know some states don't have that. I wish all states did, though. That would be easier, but nonetheless. So now let's move on to my experience with early voting. So I talked about this a little bit before, but I like early voting because it feels relaxed. It doesn't feel rushed. I don't have to stand in line on election day. You see people on the news at night, and right now, everyone's watching their preferred media of choice as they show people in lines across the country casting their vote. I can understand mail-in ballots would be helpful here, dropping them off in the ballot box, or also early voting. For me, early voting has always been easiest, though. I think every election I've voted in, I've voted early because it's way easier than election day. I have to work on election day, but it's great because I voted on Sunday. There was no traffic, no chaos. Everything was great. It was easy. In fact, last week, or 2 weeks ago, actually, when I went the first time, because early voting was open for 2 weeks. So I went to go early vote one night after work and the parking lot was full. And so I looped around the parking lot and I said, I'll come back on the weekend. There was nowhere for me to park. So I was like, not doing this. Nope, move on, come back, circle back on that. So now let's move on to a topic that is somewhat highly contested, and that's the Electoral College. What is it and why does it matter? How does it work? And why do we still use it? Basically, when you vote for president, you're not directly voting for the candidate. You're instead voting for a set of electors who will cast their vote for the president. Each state gets a certain number of electors based on the population. More on that in a minute. In most states, the candidate who wins the popular vote gets all the electors. The system was, in fact, designed to balance power between smaller states and larger states. A good example is California and Montana. Now, some people feel that, with the Electoral College, their vote doesn't really count. Or if they live in a state that always leans one way, California is a great example of that. And there's been calls to reform or abolish the Electoral College, but it's in place for a reason. And as of this moment in history, this is how we still elect our president. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of the Electoral College. The biggest argument for is that it protects the smaller states. Without it, candidates might only focus on the big cities and won't come and try to earn your vote, because otherwise they would only focus on big cities and not the rural areas. Like, for example, Ocala, or small town in Georgia, small town in Pennsylvania, what have you. Now, for somebody who also wrote an article about the census in 2020 and their efforts to still power through and get the census done despite COVID, I saw why this process is so important and why we have the Electoral College. The census directly impacts the number of electors we have. That's why in 2020, Florida had 29. In 2024, Florida has 30. Because they processed the 2020 census results, which actually earned Florida another elector. On the flip side, the arguments against the Electoral College say that the person who wins the popular vote should win the presidency. But the Electoral College was written into the Constitution and it's codified in the Constitution. The founders thought of it that way for a reason. Maybe the reasons were good. So now for my personal take on voting. I've talked about early voting at least 3 times in this video, in different areas of the video, if I haven't cut them out by now. But it's important that you do vote, because you can't complain if you don't vote. And local elections are where they matter most, because you need to get involved in your school boards. You need to get involved in your town council or city council. You need to get involved in your commissioners and speak up. Go to these events. Remember, it's we the people. Not we the government, we the people. And speaking out about things is important. Speak about things that matter. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We talked a little bit about everything. It's now 8 o'clock. I need to go take a shower and get ready for bed so I can go to sleep tonight and be ready to go to work tomorrow, because guess what? No matter what happens in this election, I still get up and go to work tomorrow, and I still have bills to pay in 2 weeks, and I still have bills to pay in 2 weeks after that. So it is what it is. If you found this video helpful or interesting, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye!